Good morning, good morning. How you guys doing today? Just type Y if you can hear me okay and the sound is good and everything is good. I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Beautiful. Love it. So yesterday we had some fun taking a look at currencies. And we started with the Aussie and we went through the Aussie pairs. And one of the things that I was pointing out to you was the importance of looking at the cross pairs to determine what's likely going to happen with the direction of price. And so we were looking through the Aussie pairs to determine what the likelihood of price movement was going forward. And so I think we left off on the CAD yen, if I'm not mistaken. And I was mentioning to you that weakness was what we were going to see over the short period of time. And so that's what took place. We got weakness, as you could see. How's the streaming quality, guys? Is the streaming quality okay? I know I haven't really done anything or drawn anything, but just curious. I'll do some drawing now. Oh, that's not what I want. There's the weakness that we were talking about coming into the market. Remember we were talking about that short-term momentum, supply coming into play, breaking of the ascending structure here, which led for a move to the downside to take place. Yeah. So as you can see, that is indeed what took place. So you can see the power of this type of analysis when you look at the structures on each of the time frames, and you can determine what is likely going to happen based on looking at that information. So today we're going to look at the Euro US dollar and the Euro pairs. And I know this is a hot topic these days, the Euro US dollar. So I think you will get a lot out of today's session. All right. So let's start by looking at the Euro US dollar first and determine what is going on here. So what I like to do, the first thing I like to do is I like to look at each of the time frames and just examine whether or not we have supply in play or demand in play. And that way I can get a better idea of the direction that price is likely going to head into. So when I look at the 6-month chart, it's a pretty difficult chart to read, this one, because we don't have any upward trends. We don't have any downward trends. What we do have is potential demand in here. And I say potential because there's a few things that we're seeing in this price action that is telling us that this area is likely still holding. But it's quite difficult, this chart, because of the dynamics of what's in play. We did have price contacting a supply area, which is what put pressure to the downside. And this demand area has been contacted once, twice, 3 times. And so usually after the 3rd time, it breaks. Demand becomes super weak, and it will eventually break. So there's mixed signals here because we don't know if it's going to break now or if price is going to rally up here. So I would label this as a neutral. Okay, let's label that as a neutral, unknown for the time being. Now we go down one time frame and we have the monthly, and we can see that currently there is an area of supply that is being contacted. Okay? Supply is being contacted. And when supply is contacted, what does that bring in? It brings in weakness. So here's the contact here. There's the contact as well. 2 contacts. So it brings in weakness, and we saw that weakness. Okay? And this is one of the reasons why I took my $1 million short trade on this pair, because of that supply coming into play. So we look at price action and we see that there was some basing inside of the supply and then a momentum candle to the downside But if you zoom in on this momentum candle, let me just bring that up. If you zoom in on this candle here, there's the green one, there's the red one. You can see that the red one does not close below the wick over here. So the momentum to the downside wasn't as aggressive as what we would like to see, okay? But still, we got a move to the downside. After that move to the downside, what happened? Price stopped. So let's just erase this. Price stopped. Why did it stop? Well, in order to determine why it stopped, we have to go down another time frame. And we look at the weekly chart, and what do we see? We see bullishness. Why do we see bullishness? Well, because an institutional area of demand has come into play. And what happens when institutional demand comes into play? It puts pressure to the upside on price. And if you examine what was taking place here with price action, you'll see we got some bearish momentum candles to the downside all throughout here. And then what happened? 2 candles of basing, and then what happened? Bullish momentum to the upside, closing above the previous wicks of the basing, another basing candle, and another momentum candle. All right. So obviously, short-term momentum is to the upside at this point. So short, medium-term momentum. Weekly represents medium-term momentum. So we have medium-term momentum to the upside, and now we need to go to another chart to determine what is likely going to take place. And we go to the weekly, or the daily chart. And you see the move taking place up here. But do you notice that on the move up, we still haven't come into any contact with supply? Okay? We still haven't come into any contact with supply. So the pressure's to the upside. So there is a bullish bias on the euro. Okay? Short term. Remember, all these have their own time frames. Short term momentum to the upside. Medium term momentum to the upside. Long term momentum to the downside. And this one is questionable. So this is the map that we have to work with. This is what tells us what direction price is going to move into. Okay? With high degree of certainty. Because we're dealing with the supply and demand that is coming in by the big players, the ones that are actually able to move price. We're not thinking about retail traders here, although we take them into consideration when we're looking at the dynamic of how price is moving. You know, for instance, we see short-term momentum to the upside, right, because of the daily chart. And when we look at the daily chart, I've been tracking the positions of retail traders. And so what do we know to be true about the positions of retail traders? Well, when they reach numbers like 88%, that's quite aggressive. Usually in the 80s and 90s is when retail traders get so aggressively positioned that they cannot continue adding to their positions any longer. You know, as a retail trader, you know what that feeling is like when you first started getting into trading. You add a position, it goes against you, you add a little bit more, it goes against you, you add a little bit more because you're thinking, oh, it just has to come back a little bit and then I'll break even. Eventually what happens? You can't stomach the drawdown anymore and eventually you get out. But by that time, you're so emotionally committed to the trade because you've lost money. You figure, well, you know, I just won't go with the against the flow anymore. Let me just start going long. And that's what typically starts to happen. You have numbers of 88%, and then they say, okay, forget it. I'm going to go long. I'm not going to fight this any longer, because if I would have just been going long all this time, I would have made money. And it's at that point where we will typically see a drop in price. Okay. But what is to stop price from dropping at this point? Well, the first thing is that institutional supply hasn't been contacted, and we do have some supply just above price. And we need a catalyst. And what do we got? We have some news coming out this morning with respect to the euro. We got the ECB rate decision. Are they going to increase the rate, decrease the rate, do nothing with the rate? And how are retail traders going to react to that? So if we have a bias, and we do have a bias, the bias is that we are likely going to see short-term momentum to the upside until supply is contacted, and retail traders are going to freak out with their short positions and switch to longs. And as they switch to longs, price will drop. But what is the signal? How do we know for a fact that this is going to happen? How do we know for a fact? Well, the one thing that we have is the ability to see the buying and selling from the institutions. And we know that the latest institutional buying area is right here. Okay. We also know that there's an ascending trend line right there. And so if after this data release we have this area being removed and price declining, and we see a break of this ascending structure, then that signals price is going to move lower. So, but I think short term, there's a very good chance that it just rallies up, contacts supply, and drops. Okay? Very good chance. I would rather just sit on the sidelines, wait for the key moves to take place, and then I will make a move in the market, because I've got my biases and I'm waiting for the signals. And if the signals are presented to me, then I will take advantage of it. Okay, so just keep in mind this: long-term down, mid-term up, short-term up, but watching signals for the short-term momentum to switch to the downside. Okay, so now that we have that, we can go over to the Euro-Aussie. And Euro-Aussie, what do we see? Well, there's a couple things that I can see right off the top of the bat. Is supply is being contacted on the weekly chart. Okay, what does that tell me? That tells me medium-term momentum to the downside. And as you can see, it's starting to play out right now. All right. We look at the daily chart. Do we see any supply or demand in play? No, we don't. But what do we see? Well, we see a structure here. Okay, an ascending structure here. Is it breaking through right now? It is breaking through right now. Let me draw it a little bit nicer. Right there. Okay. Is it breaking through right now? It's breaking through. Look at that. So weak signal. Okay. That's telling us that likely price is going to continue to the downside. If that trend line breaks, price is going to continue to the downside. And why is that? Well, because of what's happening on the weekly chart. Medium-term momentum to the downside. Short-term, what's our short-term momentum? Would be to the downside as well. Okay. So is the Euro-Aussie indicating to us that pressure to the downside is in the future for the euro? Likely, yes, likely. Because remember, for the Euro-Aussie to drop, the euro has to be weak or the Aussie has to be strong. Okay, let's switch to the Aussie really quickly. All right, we see some strength in here. Why is that? Because of the demand zone that we were talking about yesterday. So maybe the reason why this is dropping is purely because of the Aussie and has nothing to do with the euro. The thing is, for this to drop for a medium term, okay, which is what the weekly chart is suggesting, it wouldn't just be one pair doing all the facilitating of the move. It would be the two of them playing a role. So this is suggesting to me that we're going to see some weakness in the euro. Okay. Because remember, this here is medium term, and this is short term. So medium term is telling me down, and short term we're getting the signals that yes, indeed, this is going to start playing out. So it looks like the data came out right now for the euro, and let's see, so they're keeping it at 4.5, which is no shocker. And how is the euro reacting? Well, there she goes. Okay. Price is dropping now inside that area of demand that we were talking about here. Okay. This is institutional buying. If they remove this area, then there's no buying on the 4-hour chart anymore. That means short-term momentum is over. Short-term momentum to the upside is over. And they're going to go through with the rest of the supply and demand dynamics that's currently in play. Now let's look at the EURCAD to see if there's any indication of what's going to happen. Okay, EURCAD, I look at the monthly chart, and what do I see? I see a supply area coming into play right here. So what does that tell me? That tells me long-term pressure to the downside. There we go. Long-term pressure to the downside. All right. And so I look at the weekly chart. I don't see anything there. Price is just sitting in the middle of the ocean there. So this is telling me EURCAD, long-term pressure to the downside. It could take some time to build that momentum. Weekly chart's been ranging for a long time, which is telling us, you know, there's a lot of time that's been passing before the weakness comes into play. So we'd have to look at the lower time frame charts to see when this is actually going to start building momentum. If I look at the daily chart, I see there's a significant area of demand here, which tells me that for things to really kick into gear, we'd need this to be taken out, because again, this is the ranging happening on the weekly. So it needs to break out of the range, break through there, and then we'll see momentum to the downside. All right. Let's go back. So again, euro weakness, longer term, is what this chart is pointing in the direction of. Then we go to the euro pound. What do we see? Euro pound, I look at the weekly chart, and I definitely see supply being contacted. Okay, what does that tell me? Medium term, we have pressure to the downside, which is exactly what took place. We had the basing, momentum to the downside, but then over the last few weeks, it's been coasting sideways. Still, though, that pressure's to the downside because the latest area that was contacted was a supply. So we have medium-term pressure down. Okay? Medium-term pressure is down. We look at the structure on the daily chart. What do we see? We see a descending structure, which is good. As long as it holds this descending structure, we suspect that price will continue lower. We look at one more time frame lower. We see the 4-hour chart. What do we see? We see an area of demand right here, holding. If this area of demand breaks, it opens up for pressure to the downside to allow price to continue lower on the daily chart. Okay, so far you look across the euro pairs, what do you see? Signs of weakness, 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 okay? All across the board. Euro, Japanese yen. What do you see here? Same thing. I'm going to rush through these ones because we're just coming up on our 20 minutes. But take a look, okay? What do you see? Supply, medium-term pressure to the downside. Supply, longer-term pressure to the downside. Okay? Ascending structure. looks like it might be breaking soon. If it breaks, short to medium term pressure to the downside. Demand zone just taken out. Short term pressure to the downside. So that's euro weakness or yen strength. And we definitely got some yen strength yesterday, if you could tell. This zone up here broke. Pressure's to the downside now. Okay? But again, euro weakness, yen strength. Okay? Let's look at the euro again. We got that spike to the downside, weakness on the euro, and we're getting strength in the yen. So euro yen move to the downside, yeah, high odds. Very high odds. And last but not least, we got the euro kiwi. This one is an ugly chart, a very ugly chart. We have daily chart with some supply in play. It put pressure to the downside, rallied back up. We're seeing pressure back to the downside. Higher time frame supply was not contacted. It fell short of hitting it. So I wouldn't be focusing too much on this chart. Okay, ladies and gents, that's it. I hope that was helpful for you. I hope that gives you some clarity as to what's taking place, especially with the euro US dollar chart and the euro pair in general. And yeah, I'll leave you with that. If you don't mind hitting the like button and even sharing it with your fellow traders so that they can get informed and educated as to the dynamics of price and a different perspective on how to trade the markets, that would be great. All right. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day, folks. It was nice spending this morning with you. I'm going to drink my coffee here, eat a little bit of breakfast with my family, then I'll get back to the charts and do some analysis. All right, so hope you enjoyed it. You take care of yourself, and we'll see you again tomorrow morning. Take care, everybody.